Welcome back, ProGuides family. How are you doing today? My name is Renox, and I hope you guys are doing just as great as I am because I can't wait to bring you this guide. Today's subject will be 8 techniques that pros use all the time, but you don't. I'm sure just by implementing a few of these techniques into your own game, you'll be able to jump a few ranks solely just by knowing them. It doesn't matter whether you're out here trying to get out of silver or you've already reached global elite, because this guide will have something for everyone, and I'm sure by the end of it, you will have learned a lot. But before we get right into it, it is of course time for our question of the day. And today, we'd love to know, why do you play Counter-Strike? Personally, I just can't get enough of the competitive aspect of it. No matter how good you become, you can always get better, and that really keeps me going. But what about you? Why do you play Counter-Strike? I'm really looking forward to reading the comments on this one. Let's start by going over the first technique, that being effective trading. Effective trading is when you sacrifice you or a teammate's life for one of your opponents. Trading is used a lot on high levels of CS. There's no pro team that doesn't rely on trading. That being said, most casual players, even at higher ranks, either don't know about the concept or don't use it as effectively as they could. So how do you trade effectively, you might ask? Well, it's actually pretty simple. If you suspect a player is holding an angle, let's say dust too short, then you and a teammate will try to fight him in a 2v1. The first player will swing and the second player peeks close to him. The player holding therefore gets peeked by 2 people simultaneously, and since the first player that is peeking is swinging wide, in order to kill both players, the guy holding has to first track a guy swinging him and then flick back to the guy peeking close. This is extremely difficult to do, and when all 3 players are able to aim at a decent level, it always ends up in either a 1-for-1 trade or a 1-for-0 trade. Although the concept of trading is fairly straightforward, it isn't always as easy as it sounds. You need to cooperate with a teammate, which at some levels of play can be really difficult without a pre-made or a friend, and you also need to get the timing just right. If you get the timing wrong, you might just be giving your opponent too much space and he might get the 2 kills instead. Another important technique that can be easily implemented by just focusing on it solely for a game or two is repositioning after you get a kill, make noise, or otherwise give away your position. If your position is known, it's much easier to get killed. You might get mollied or forced out, for example, but even if your enemies don't use their utility on you, you could get hard cleared and die for free. So whenever there's an opportunity to do so, make sure to change up your position. For example, let's say you're playing Inferno and you're hiding in the cubby on long. You might get a kill on an unsuspecting terrorist. Afterwards, you reposition to Arch and kill the guy trying to clear cubby. Then you reposition back to Library and kill another guy trying to kill you on Arch. By repositioning, you make sure you don't just get traded, and it might even allow for easier multi-kills like in the example I just showed you. Sometimes you might not be able to reposition so easily though. Maybe your opponents are sticking together, or you just can't move away right after you get spotted. This is where your and your teammate's utility comes in. If you're stuck in a spot, you can always try to flash yourself out or ask a teammate to flash for you instead and reposition that way. Now that we've mentioned flashes, let's talk about the next technique involving it, and that's pop flashing. Pop flashes are flashes that give away no warning and don't allow your opponents to react to them, so that once you peek them, they're just sitting there fully blind waiting to get killed. On YouTube, you can find tons and tons of good pop flashes that allow you and your teammates to get easy kills for free. Unfortunately, a lot of people either don't know about them or just don't use them. However, in pro games, they're being utilized all the time, and you should be using them too. Try to learn as many pop flashes as you can, and in your next games, you'll notice you are much more comfortable and confident in peeking angles. One part of pop flashes and flashing for your teammates in general is good communication, and that brings us to our next technique. Proper communication is a super rare skill to find nowadays. Loads of people, and admittedly myself included, are only really focused on their own mechanical skill and how good their aim is. But good communication can win and will win you games. Nowadays, there are lots of pro teams that will upload videos showing their communication, and I can't recommend watching these enough. In them, you can see how much communication occurs in these teams, and if you want to compare it to your own matchmaking games, let's be honest, it's just night and day. I'm not saying that you should be using your mic 24/7, because a lot of players in your matchmaking games aren't used to people talking a lot, and sometimes they even get tilted by it. But you should try to give all the useful info that you can, and sometimes if you notice one of your teammates isn't giving some crucial pieces of information, like the bomb being spotted or something of the sorts, then you could be the person that calls it out for them. Who knows, you might even make the difference and win your team the round because of it. Honestly, how to communicate properly is such a broad subject, and this was by no means a comprehensive guide on it. So if you'd like to see a video about it all on its own, make sure to let us know in the comments down below. So let's start talking about another key concept that's being used by the pros every round, which is something I rarely see in ranks even as high as Faceit level 10 and Global Elite, and that is setting up good crossfires. Crossfire setups are crucial to deal with competent terrorist teams that work together and are able to trade efficiently. Because that's never usually the case unless you're playing against high-level teams, players that only really play matchmaking aren't really forced to learn it. But if you're able to get it down early with a pre-made friend or even just a random, you'll be able to dominate the CT side and pick up most rounds with relative ease. To give an example of a good crossfire setup, I'll take the B side of Overpass. One player will be sitting on pillar jiggling monster, while the second player will be on wood watching short. As soon as the guy pillar spots someone in monster, they switch. So the guy pillar will start watching short and the player wood will hold monster. People running out of monster will be looking towards pillar because they last saw an enemy there, allowing for the player wood to shoot them coming out in their side, while the guy on pillar will just be watching the opponents coming out of short. This setup will be even more powerful if you have a third player watching short from graffiti as well, but that's not 100% necessary. This is just one example of a crossfire setup, and there are tons more that you can come up with on B-Site Overpass alone. Going into an offline server with a friend to find a good or potentially good crossfire and then trying them in a match is the fastest way to learn more of them. Another technique that surprisingly a lot of people don't know about is having protocols. In Counter-Strike, a lot of the time you have to react fast and make the right decision at doing that. Doing this on the fly is simply impossible because you'll either be too slow or you'll be making wrong decisions constantly. What you want to do to avoid this is setting up protocols. You do this by going into an offline server and just thinking about what could happen while you're playing around your spot. Let's take Mirage B site for example. Run towards the B site and premeditate what your opponents can do and how you should react to it. What do you do if they're rushing B? In what position do you want to be in? What utility should you be using? What are you going to be holding, and how will your opponents deal with your utility? Maybe at the beginning of the round, you'll want to listen for steps and jump spot B apartments. If you notice that your opponents are indeed rushing, maybe you'll want to throw your incendiary under the window of apartments to catch T's jumping out of it and flash apartments while falling back to default. Maybe then you'll want to hold for your opponents running out of apartments. If they do jump into your molly, then maybe you'll want to crouch and hold for your opponents to run out towards short. Or maybe you'll want to react to it completely differently. Regardless, you want to get multiple ideas of how to deal with each situation so you're not being completely predictable every single round. After you find 3 to 5 ways to deal with your opponents rushing B, now you can think about how you want to deal with your opponents doing a contact play from apartments, or doing something more like a split from apartments and short. Or maybe even how you want to react to an execute with smokes, or how you want to react to them taking B late, etc, etc, etc. The more protocols you have, the easier the game will become for you. So try to really get it down, and even though it might seem to be time consuming, it's honestly one of the fastest ways to learn. Another big thing that I see being used at the pro level all the time, which is something I only really see good players do in regular games, is conditioning. Conditioning is when you're building an expectation for your opponents and then you break it. So let's say you always throw an incendiary on ramp of A-Site Mirage in order to stop a rush. After a while, your opponents will get used to it and won't think anything of it anymore. This is when you could abuse their comfort and go for a ramp peek behind said incendiary, or maybe you want to push Palace with it. Doing the same thing for a few rounds and then suddenly doing something different can really throw your opponents off guard, and you'll be able to catch them while they're not even ready. Once you're able to catch your opponent off guard once or twice, they'll be a lot less comfortable, constantly thinking of what you can do. Getting into your opponent's head and making them uncomfortable is really important, because if you allow them to play their own game, they'll be playing a lot better than if they have to constantly be thinking about what you can suddenly do in this round. Breaking expectations isn't also something that can only be done on the CT side. If you notice your opponents are constantly smoking off one area of the map, you could catch them off guard one round by seemingly randomly pushing through it. This will be a good reminder for your opponents that smokes aren't walls, and in the next coming rounds, your opponents will think twice before they get too comfortable with a smoke holding your push, because they never know what that maniac might do this round. The last thing that pros do all the time is actually pretty well known, but most players are too lazy to do it or just don't enjoy doing it at all, and this is watching demos. Watching demos is a necessity if you want to improve as fast as you can. You'll be able to notice mistakes way sooner than you would by just playing, because most of the time you will make a mistake and won't actually get punished right away. By watching a demo, you'll be able to spot that mistake before you have to lose a round or even a game because of it. If you don't enjoy watching your demos, or if you want to truly take the most that you can from it, I'd recommend getting a coach to watch it with you. When I was trying to rank up from Faceit level 6, I felt stuck until I got a coach to watch my demos with me. In just a few months' time, I was sitting comfortably at Faceit level 10. And ever since, I can't recommend getting a coach for yourself enough. You can learn so much from them and improve so much faster. Luckily, on ProGuides.com, we have tons of them just waiting for you to allow them to help you improve. So make sure to check them out over on ProGuides.com. Well guys, that's all that we have for you now. If you enjoyed today's video or maybe even learned something, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe even hit that notification bell. With it checked, you won't even have to worry about missing out on another chance to improve, and while you're at it, make sure to check out the rest of the channel as well as ProGuides.com, where we offer amazing coaching to really get you to the next level, as well as the original Simple Master course. And with that, I wish you a great rest of your day and the best of luck on implementing today's tips.